Ask yourself, do you have one name? So what makes you think Christ has one name? Don't forget, God made man in his image. Therefore, Christ has to be the man of the true God himself. In other words, God made this angel himself. But if you were to ask the so-called scholars, who is Christ, they will tell you Jesus, even though he's not born on Christmas Day. Some even say Haile Selassie is the second coming of Christ, even though he is not born on Christmas Day either. Because the real Christ has to be born on Ethiopian Christmas Day, not the pagan December 25th, because Ethiopia doesn't follow Rome. Not only that, the Ethiopian calendar does not follow BC 80 on their calendar. In other words, they don't follow that Jesus crucifixional story. And if you was to ask, was Jesus' dad a king when he was born? Everybody will be like, no, but his heavenly father in the heavens was king. In other words, the heathens want you to believe that their God is in heaven. That's why they said this. Christians of ages before never heard of Jesus as Christ. Why? Because the original Ethiopian Bible lets you know that Christmas is on January 7th for Joseph, also known as Moses. Christians from ages since before never heard of Jesus Christ. It's just the earth richness, birth to a Christ. Sun sweet of every night, Mesopotamia of every night, Hindu Kush of every night, Dravidian of every night, Masada of every night, Ethiopian of every night. So the Ethiopian original Bible told you this. It is important to note that the EOTC has two Bible canons, the broader canon, which has more books, and the Haile Selassie version, which is the narrow canon, and it consists of 72 books. And within it, it tells you about the second book of Esdras. And in the second book of Esdras, it warned us that they would change the story. That's why in 1962, a new Amharic translation from Ge'ez alone was printed. In other words, the original Bible was written in Ge'ez. Why? Because realizing that there ought to be a revision from the original Hebrew and Greek of the existing translation of the Bible. In other words, the church, the Ethiopian church, annexed themselves with the Vatican. Therefore, they was adding in books. That's what the second book of Ezra said, woe unto those that add or take away from the word. So, like, for example, who is the man of the true God? My servant Job, that there is no one like him in the earth, a man blameless and upright. So, who is Job? Job is Jehoshaphat, also known as Josedek. So was Jesus, the son of Josedek, who in their time built a house and set up the holy temple to the Lord, which was prepared for everlasting glory. In other words, neither was there a young man born like Joseph. There is no one like him in the earth. Job is Joseph, who is Josedek. So Jesus, the son of Josedek. In other words, Jesus, the son of Josedek, is together with the servants of Solomon. He's also together with Moses, the man of God. Remember, he also goes by the name of David. So a Psalm of Solomon, Psalm 72, who is the king's son. Remember, when the real Christ has to be the Prince of Peace. So his dad had to be king. So if you ask them, was Jesus' dad a king? They have to say no. The only other explanation they could say is that their king is in heaven. So that's why it's mentioned in Psalm 115 that the nations or the heathens would say that their God is in heaven and he does as he pleases. That's why they have to make idols of silver and gold made by the hands of men. Why? Because they don't want to say the truth. For example, look what's going on.
Was debating another Israelite, and when he was debating him, he tried to run away from the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 26, in which it says that he that overcometh will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. So,
hello, in reference to Moses, because that story is supposed to happen during Revelation. Exodus and Revelation happens at the same time. Part 3 coming up.